If you watch my videos, you know that I very much enjoy fantasy games, dungeon crawlers in particular. I mean, you control a hero, you go out there, you slaughter monsters, you use brutal violence against them, you steal their treasures, and you still get to feel like a hero and be celebrated when you go back to the village with the head of some of those monsters. What's not to love about it? Of course, it's a fascinating genre. And so, because of this passion of mine for this style of gaming, I was very interested in the game Dragonwood as soon as I kind of learned what it was about. Yes, it is set in a wood, in a forest, but it is a dungeon crawler. In essence, it's an outdoors dungeon crawler. It's set in a wood because we are told that it is a wood, but mechanically you have the same kind of things that you find in a dungeon crawler. The space is very abstract. Also, there are cards with a green background, so we're told that that represents like trees in a forest. If it was gray and we were told that those are chambers in a dungeon, nothing would change. It is that kind of game. You control a party of heroes, a fairly abstract, actually it's a completely abstract party of heroes represented by cards, and you have a hand of cards that change all the time, and you form sets, and you use those cards to attack the monsters, right? No, to purchase the dice that then you use to attack the monsters. You use the cards to produce the dice that you use against the monsters. It is not like Kono Danshires where you roll dice to see how many dice you roll, but it is a strangely laborious idea to see what resources you have available when you decide to attack the monsters. At the core, you're optimizing your hand of cards to maximize your chances of getting a good die roll to then kill monsters and gain treasures. And you're trying to do so more efficiently than the other players so that you score more points and you win the game at the end. Dragonwood, let's see how it works. The game revolves around two decks of cards, one with green backs representing the encounters that the players will have in the wood that they are exploring, the other deck representing the heroes that the players are recruiting, and then you have a pool of dice. And at the beginning I was rolling dice and thinking, man, I'm really unlucky today, the dice hate me today, I can't roll a single 6 or a 5. Before I realized that these dice do not have 6s or 5s. They have 2 2s, 2 3s, a 1, and a 4, which makes it a little harder sometimes to calculate odds simply because it's so natural for us. If I need to roll a 7, I know more or less how likely I am to do it with 2 dice or 3 dice. With these dice, a little more different. Takes a little more work. On the other hand, you can count on more consistent results because the 2 and the 3s are more likely than the extreme results. So results tend to average within a certain curve, which is not too vast. Now, the cards that represent the encounters, some are green, representing monsters that the players are trying to defeat. Some are purple, representing treasures and advantages that they may acquire, the players may acquire. There's also some orange cards representing events, but those do not go in the central area. When you flip them face up, you resolve the event as described by the text on the card and then discard it. Usually there will be 5 cards in the middle of the board or the table for players to capture, to attempt to capture. And to do so, players will need to use both dice and the cards. And the cards representing the adventurers are marked by different suits, indicated by the color on the frame and the general art, and simply represented by different art. In truth, they are fairly interchangeable. It's not that they really do anything different. They don't have special abilities. This elf doesn't do anything different. There may be different numbers, but not a big deal. So they have a suit represented by the color and the art and a number. Also, there are these cards here, the ladybug. When you find the lucky ladybug, you discard it and you draw 2 new cards instead. You start with a hand of 5 cards, and during the game you can have 9 in your hand, no more than 9. During your turn, you can do one of 2 things. The simplest thing, you reload your hand. That is, you draw a card and you add it to your hand. Ta-da! That's it. That would be your turn. The other thing that you can do occasionally, when you have a good hand of cards, ladybug, is to try to capture cards in the middle of the table. As you can see, these cards they represent the targets. Well, they have a victory point value if they are cards that enemies that you defeat for victory points. They have an effect if they are items that you're trying to acquire. But they both have a small table representing the values that you need to produce to defeat the enemy. You need to be able to match at least the value of one of these possible approaches to the task. That is, the sword represents the number you need to produce if you choose to strike the enemy, the boot, the number you need to produce if you're stomping the enemy, and the orange one if you're screaming at the enemy. Dude, you can scream real loud, I guess. How do you do that? We have this player that tells us here. First, you need to play cards to produce dice, and then you need to roll them to produce the result for the attack that you have selected. So the better combinations you have, the more dice you get, the more likely it is that you'll be able to acquire the treasure or defeat the monster that you're targeting. When you choose to try to capture a card, you play cards from your hand again to generate dice. So, for example, if I'm discarding cards that have numbers in a row, such as in this case here, I will generate dice for the strike. Or if I have cards of the same color, so in this case these cards would work either way, then I'm generating dice for the scream. So I could play these 3 cards. I decide to scream at the wild boar because the number is lower than if I were to strike. I decide to scream at the wild boar. I'm playing 3 cards for the scream. They're on the same color. I grab 3 dice. Suppose I decide to play these cards, then I will play them for a stomp, and this could be a good idea, for example, here, because the stomp value is the lowest that there is. Then if I'm playing these 2 cards, I target this one, I play these 2 cards for a stomp, then my stomp will have 2 dice. And if you are to do so, same color, numbers in a row, and stomp, we saw them. So basically, you choose the attack. You produce cards that meet the requirements. As you can see, the 3 different attacks give you dice depending on different combinations of cards. You grab those dice, you roll them, and to be successful in your task, you need to roll equal to or higher than the target number for the type of attack that you have chosen. So if I'm stomping and trying to grab the sword, I need at least a total of 6, 10 for strike, 7 for scream. If I successfully attack the monster, I grab the card and I put it in my victory pile. If I took a treasure, I put it in my play area. Some are permanent, so I can use them anytime that I'm performing a certain action. Some other are one-time use. If you are successful, you discard all of the cards that you used in the successful attack. If you're unsuccessful, then you discard only one to represent a wound, to represent a penalty that you experience, but you take back all of the other cards that you use for the attack, and you can use them in a further attack. But of course, another attack in another turn, because you can only perform one thing per turn. Either an attack in one of the 3 forms, or reload your hand. The game continues until the players went through the adventure deck, which is the hero deck, 2 times. Once the deck is exhausted, you simply reshuffle the discard pile to form the next adventure deck / hero deck. Also in this deck there are 2 dragons that, in this deck here there are 2 dragons that you need to defeat. They are in the bottom half of the deck. Of course, now I can't find them. If the 2 dragons are defeated, then that also triggers the end of the game. When the end of the game is declared, the players count the victory points that are generated by the creatures that they captured. Also, the player with the most creatures scores 3 extra victory points, and at that point, the player with the highest total is the winner of the game. Now, there's nothing terribly wrong with this game. It's just that there was also nothing that jumped at me as amazing, as particularly entertaining. In the introduction, I made a little fun of the fact that you had these 2 mechanics that go together when maybe one of them would be enough. I've seen card management games where you go and attack monsters. Thunderstone would be one of them. There are games where you only use dice, dungeon roll. I didn't like that game very much, but definitely was contained within a single main mechanic. Seeing the two of them together is original, but also I don't know how much it really adds to the genre, how much it adds to the experience. It does feel unnecessarily complicated. Not that it makes the game too complicated. Oh my gosh, I can't play it. I can't wrap my mind around it. Just in the sense that for what the game has to offer, a game that has the appearance of something that tries to be light. You just put some resources together and kill monsters. It's supposed to move fast. For a game that doesn't have much more to offer than a light game, it does feel too complicated. It does feel there's too much thinking involved. At the end, ultimately, to reach a solution, to find a solution which is just one. Usually, there is 1-2 optimal moves that you can make based on the cards that you have. You can produce dice for a certain target result, and you look at the target result and you see which one is the one that gives you the most. You look at the cards. Okay, I have a lot of cards of a single color. Which is that card would be the one that I have the best chances. I roll the dice. It gets pretty obvious. Yes, you may have situations where, well, this set of cards, if I moved in different ways, like you use these 3 cards for that target or those 3 cards for that other target, and then which one? Oh my gosh, which one? And maybe one of them will give you 3 points and the other one 4. So at that point, that is the tiebreaker. I didn't find that there were decisions that were tense. I didn't find that there were decisions that were all that interesting. Yes, a bit of hand management. If I use these cards, I'm going to break these other possible sets that I could build later. But minor stuff. It felt like there were several steps, fairly mechanical, that you go through to assess which is the solution that seems to be objectively the best one. You do not have much long-term planning. You do not have much strategy in that sense. There isn't much interaction among players. You're simply trying to be better than other people are to achieve your results faster. The opponents are all trying to go for the same things. You can't really affect things in any way based on what the opponents are doing. So it felt like a little dry and a little too lean, but with unnecessarily laborious steps to get there. I like games that give me tough decisions, where there are a lot of decisions that seem to be good, and I'm struggling because I don't know which one I should go for. Here is just a matter of solving the puzzle. So I go through the steps and the obvious solution comes up. I go for it. I'm lucky or not lucky. It doesn't feel like, even if I'm lucky, there is that much satisfaction, simply because I didn't go through the grueling process of sorting through various decisions, interacting with my opponent, reading what they're doing. Recently I played another dice game, which in a sense again is about rolling dice to meet certain objectives and acquire certain items. It is Dice Heist, and I like this one very much more than Dragonwood, because the engine is more linear, it's more simple. You only have dice, not card. And yet the solution and yet the targets that you should go for are not nearly as obvious as Dragonwood. I guess Dragonwood could be good if you are playing it with kids and then you want to show them, teach them how to form sets and to assess which is the best solution. Then in that case, yes, because it's clear cut, finding which options are absolutely definitely better than others and which one is the obviously best solution available is something that can be done. In that sense, it could be, I guess, a training for kids to show them some game mechanics and some basic ideas about decision making, because it's always easier to teach about decision making when there are decisions that clearly pay off, as opposed to other ones that don't. With complex games, things are not so easy. But I really don't see much more of a use. I guess, again, it may have an audience because people like card games, people like dice games, and if you cannot choose between the two mechanics, you have a game that gives you both. But usually I prefer games that give me this type of experience with one of them. So there's a strange paradox. I prefer lighter games and heavier games. Somehow this falls in between without really being the best of both worlds, but feeling like one of those worlds, like a card game or a dice game with a system of mechanics that do not feel fully organic, they do not feel like really add much, and that do not feel like they add much to the experience. So I was a little underwhelmed by the game. I didn't hate it. I don't think I'll play it much in the future, because there are better dungeon crawlers, both among the lighter ones and the heavier ones. This one, I guess, in a nutshell, is not a bad game. It just takes too much work to get to what the game has to offer.